Hey guys, how's it going? Justin here with Practically Squared. Welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to bring you guys something a little bit different today. Today what we're going to be talking about is the Kahles K540i DLR. I just got this thing in last week, mounted it up, did some initial testing on it, and then I took it out to a match and shot a one-day PRS match with it. In today's video, I want to kind of share some of my initial thoughts and opinions and kind of first impressions. Having got the scope in, it's still pretty new to me, but I have ran it through a match. So I learned some of the quirks running it through a match, at least enough to share some first initial impressions. All right, guys, so before we get into the video, I always like to hit you guys with the disclosure. As far as my affiliation with Kahles Swarovski, there is none. I bought this optic with my own money. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. The opinions and thoughts that I'm going to share in this video are strictly mine. I don't have any sponsors or anybody to kind of adhere to. I don't sell these things. I'm not trying to make money off of you. So that's kind of where this information is coming from. As far as me, I've been into long range hunting most of my life. And then I got into competitive long range shooting about 3 years ago. Got big into PRS. This is my third full season of PRS competition. I've shot over a dozen 2-day Pro Series matches and a buttload of 1-day matches. I'm by no means a pro level shooter, but I'm definitely aspiring and working my butt off to kind of get to that point. So take the thoughts and opinions in this video for what they're worth. At the end of the day, I bought this scope as a PRS competitor, a scope to go on my PRS rifle. So depending on your needs, your applications, some of the things that I prioritize might be a little bit different than say somebody who's buying this to just go shoot KYL matches or belly prone style matches. So like I said, take the opinions and thoughts in this video with the proverbial grain of salt. So with that stuff out of the way, let's get into the video. All right, guys, so giving you a brief overview on the Kahles K540i. The Kahles K540i is Kahles' latest scope to hit the market. They released it earlier this year at SHOT Show, and it is a scope that the big selling point to it is it boasts a huge field of view, which we're going to talk a lot about in today's video. I'll roll some specs up here on the side, but some brief things you need to know. 36mm main tube, so similar to a Zico or the 7-35 tangent. 56mm objective, which is pretty standard for a scope in this kind of target demographic, I guess we could say. One of the big things Kahles is known for is having the Parallax up here under your elevation dial. What that allows them to do is to move your windage around. So they have the option for a left side windage, where if you're a righty, it's really nice because you could see it very easily from that side of the rifle, from the left side of the rifle shooting as a righty. You could of course still get it as a right side windage if you want to just keep it the same as your other scopes, or if you're a lefty, of course you would probably prefer that right side windage anyways. This scope features a giant ocular lens. Like, this thing is gargantuan, and we'll kind of talk about it, but I believe that's one of the main ways they're able to achieve that insane field of view. They offer this in a DLR version and in a non-DLR version. Essentially what the DLR version gets you is 10mm per rev turrets. The advantage to that, the numbers are going to be spaced further apart. Generally, if you're shooting inside of around 1,000 yards or less, most PRS matches, those kind of guys are going to prefer a 10mm turret just because it spaces them further apart, allows you to dial quicker and stuff like that. Also, your reticle options are a little limited depending on the DLR versus the non-DLR. I got the SKMR Plus, which is a basic tree reticle. It's 2/10 horizontal, 2/10 vertical, and then it also has some 5/10 marks and some different stuff on that vertical stadia there. But pretty simple, simplistic reticle. And overall, this scope really is kind of designed for that PRS market. Kahles has said outright that they designed the scope for the PRS market. 419 said that they worked with Kahles to kind of help design this. And I'm sure Shannon K and some of the guys at K&M, they're strongly affiliated with Kahles. I'm sure they worked with them as well on it. But the scope really does check a lot of boxes for PRS. So with this basic kind of overview out of the way, let's get right into it and let's talk about my experiences with the scope so far. So whenever I got my Kahles K540i DLR in, the first thing I did was got it mounted up. I opted to go for the Area 419 mount, their standard mount. They do offer a mid cantilever, which I believe they actually recommend for this optic because it kind of needs to be mounted a little far forward. I talked to some buddies. I have a buddy that has one of these scopes and I get to play with his at the Vortex Vengeance PRS match a couple months ago. And he was running the standard Area 419 mount and he said he was able to push it far enough forward that it worked out great. So that's what I opted to go for. I didn't get the mid cantilever. One thing you do have to be aware of with the scope, depending on the mount, it's going to be kind of picky because you need to push this thing forward. So if you're running like a spur or a gray ops, those mounts take up a ton of rail space and you don't have the luxury of being able to push it a couple rail spots forward to get the eye relief you need. So just kind of take that in consideration. The scope is going to be kind of somewhat mount specific. You're going to have to do some research there. I opted to go for a 1.5 inch height mount. I normally go for like 1.25 inch, but a lot of guys prefer the 1.5, so I decided to give it a try. So after I got the scope mounted up and made sure it was level in relation to my send it level, I took it out to the range and I did a track test. I'm big on track testing stuff. PRS is a sport where you need to limit the variables, and I feel like doing a track test is something that's simple and easy, and it gives you some reassurance. It buys you some peace of mind that your optic's doing what it's needing to do. So I did a track test, and it track tested perfectly fine. I ran it down to 12 mils and out to 1 mil both ways for windage, which I know isn't a lot, but I'm mainly worried about that vertical tracking, which it tracked absolutely perfect. Kahles kind of has a good track record in terms of their tracking ability of their scopes. The next thing I did was, of course, get it zeroed, and that was about it. Did a little bit of dry fire practice with it, did some positional practice at some dot drills at 100 yards and 200 yards, and then I subsequently took it out to a match. The match I decided to shoot was the War Rifles match. It's out in Tremont, Pennsylvania at the Geisley range. That's actually the same location where the 2025 PRS Pro Series finale is going to be held. Drew Walters puts on the matches out there, does a damn good job. If you shot any of Drew's matches, you know they're pretty challenging, and War as a general whole, that range could be tricky with the winds. You're shooting down into a valley and up out the other side. The wind's real tricky, the directions can kind of lie to you, and it's a challenging range. Drew also likes to do a lot of stages where you're shooting at a target way off to the left and way off to the right. So you're doing tons of panning, tons of troop line S stages where you got multiple target engagements from multiple positions, and the match was all positional. There were no bipod stages. At least I didn't use a bipod on any of the stages. So it was a good match, in my opinion, to go out and try a scope that boasts a huge field of view, because that's a match where that huge field of view is going to kind of come into play and help you out. So once I got to the match, the first thing I did was lay down and I confirmed my zero, which was absolutely perfect with 3 shots in a little hole exactly where it needed to be. Then I found a target that was in that 600-ish yard range, and I set my parallax there. The way I like to set parallax, find that target, get the image crystal clear, and then I like to bob my head up and around to make sure that reticle's not dancing. That ensures that my optic's parallax free. Then I found a target at 1,000 yards, did the head bob test, confirmed that it was pretty decent. It wasn't the most crystal clear, like it could have been adjusted a little bit, but whenever I bobbed my head around, the reticle didn't dance around, which made me have a little bit of confidence in terms of it being a little parallax forgiving. One of the initial things that I was concerned with this scope, I read online some people saying that it might not be as parallax forgiving as other scopes. And from my experience going out to that range there, initially I was like, it seems to be pretty good to me. If I could parallax it for 500-600 yards and then also be good at 1,000, and then I found a target in that 300-yard range and checked it there, and it was pretty decent all the way around. It wasn't quite perfect at 1,000 yards, like it could be adjusted a little bit, but that reticle wasn't moving, which is the real telltale sign of not having your parallax completely fucked up. So after that, I got ready and I shot the match. My first stage, I decided to run this optic on 20 power. Normally I shoot most of my stages on 20 power. The previous scope that I had been running was a Nightforce ATAC R 7-35 with the mil-C reticle. And before I went to the match, I checked this scope in relation to my Nightforce ATACer, and I found that to get the same field of view as my Nightforce, I needed to run this thing on 25 power. I didn't want to start the match on that 25 power just in case it bit me right off the bat. So I decided to start the match on 20 power. First stage went pretty good, and I subsequently decided to up the magnification. Since you have the huge field of view that this scope has, it gives you 2 options. You could either run similar power to what you're running and have a ton more field of view, or you could crank that magnification up and be able to resolve smaller details. What I found on those subsequent stages, whenever I cranked it up to 25 power, was that I was able to see more closely where my bullet was going. I wasn't as much relying on the plate rock. I was almost seeing kind of the puff, the vicinity of where that bullet is. I'm not going to lie to you guys and tell you guys I saw every single bullet, but I saw the vast majority of the bullets. I was able to discern more accurately and more easily accurately, I should say, where exactly those bullets were going, which allowed me to make more precise corrections and have a little bit of more confidence in it. I feel like part of it is running at higher magnification. And also, while the Nightforce ATAC-R has pretty damn good glass, this is a scotch better. I would say, in kind of comparing this to some other optics, it's not quite tangent theta 7-35 glass. Like, that glass is pretty damn good. And I don't feel it's quite Zico glass. It's pretty close. It's in between an ATAC-R or a Gen 3 Razor. It is a very similar scope. It's in between one of those and like a Zico, not quite a Zico, and definitely not quite a tangent. That's kind of my personal preference on glass. But what you're getting in this optic is that insane field of view, right? That's like the big selling point with this scope. Another thing that I found over the course of the match that I really enjoyed was the DLR turret. One of the reasons why I decided to try another scope was because I liked my ATAC-R, but I hated the fact that the way the zero stop is set up and the way the turret's set up, I could never get that thing perfectly lined up on zero. And it's a 12 mil turret and it's kind of smaller diameter. The numbers are super close together. You're not able to discern the differences as easily. So what I found with that scope was that, like, whenever I would dial to 2.3, I would always question, like, is that 2.3 or 2.4 or 2.2? Like, I'd be kind of second guessing myself and dialing slower with that scope than the scope that I ran before the ATAC-R, which is the Leupold Mark V 7-35. So back to the Kahles K540i DLR. The DLR turrets were absolutely awesome. The clicks on these things are pretty sweet, and the way it's a 10 mil turret and those numbers are spaced apart, it was real easy for me to dial. Generally, I run turret tape, and I did order turret tape for this, but it hasn't came in yet. So what I did was I just put a clear piece of tape over the top and just marked my turrets that way, and it worked pretty dang good to the point where I don't even know if I'm going to end up putting the turret tape on it at the end of the day. This just works so good, I might just cancel my order for the turret tape. So another big observation that I had running this scope in a match was the fact that I actually enjoyed the left side windage. I was wishy-washy on whether I wanted to get left side windage or right side windage. Ultimately, I kind of took the analogy of, if you're going to get the local sandwich, you might as well get it with everything that comes on it to get the full experience. Kahles is known for their left side windage, and since I was a righty, I figured I'd just get it and try it and see whether I liked it or not. And honestly, I genuinely kind of liked the left side windage. What I found was I was more apt to actually reach up and dial corrections into my wind. For example, there was a stage off these rocks where you had a big small at 700 yards, and my initial wind call was 3/10 left, went up there, sent my first shot, missed it slightly off the left, measured it, reached up, made my correction, which would have been 6/10 left, put 6/10 on this, or put, center on it since I had 6/10 dialed in, proceeded to smack the center of the target. Now the wind kind of went up and went down, but I did pretty dang good on the stage. And I've honestly never in my 3 years of PRS career have I ever reached up and dialed wind into my gun on the stage. That left side windage was real easy to see. It gave me confidence. The turrets are super tactile. I was super confident in just reaching up and dialing it, even though I never practiced it before. So it worked out good, and honestly, it's already kind of proven worth its weight in gold. Like, I really do kind of like that left side windage. So we've kind of went over a couple things that I liked about the scope. The big thing that I don't mean to be redundant about is the huge field of view on the scope. It is really what sells it. It's what everybody's talking about, and I honestly feel like they're not exaggerating. Like, the field of view is really nice. So now I want to take the time to go over some basic pros, cons of this scope. So let's first start off with the cons, and then we'll kind of end on a pro note. So the first con that I'm going to hit this optic with is it's very expensive. This scope, if you haven't looked it up, it's about $4,500. These things are very expensive for what they are. Now, for that $4,500, you're getting the optic and a box with some manuals, and that's about it. The sunshade does not come included. That's about another $60 or $70, give or take. And you're not getting flip caps, which a lot of scopes come with flip caps. You're not even getting any swag, stickers, patches, any of that stuff. Like, it's pretty plain Jane, and for the price, I would have liked to have seen Kahles include some flip caps, or especially a sunshade, because the sunshade's something I like to have. They didn't. It kind of sucks. I see both sides of it. Like, if you're going to spend $4,500 on a scope, what's another $60 for sunshade? But then again, they should have just included it, right? And then as far as the flip caps, most of the time, whenever companies include flip caps, they either suck or they're the Tenebrex caps, which I don't really like the Tenebrex because they don't fold completely down, but that's just kind of me. I like the Vortex. I think they're the Defender scope caps, but it still would have been nice for this thing to come with some stuff, right? It's a very expensive scope. So that's con number one. Con number two is going to be, because of the design, the scope needs to be pushed forward. So you have to be cognizant of the mount you're running. I'm not going to come on here and tell you what mounts aren't going to work. All I could tell you is I had a buddy with the Area 419 normal mount, and that's what I opted to get for mine, and it works perfectly fine. I know a lot of guys are buying the Area 419 mid cantilever. I didn't find that I needed the mid cantilever. I tried my buddies out and he had this mount, so I just bought the same mount as him. The big selling point to the 419 mount is it doesn't take up a ton of rail space, and it's got this slight cantilever on both ends kind of built into it. So that allows you to kind of push it forward. I still have another slot of Picatinny if I needed to push it even further forward. If you're running one of the, or going to try to run one of the scope mounts that take up dang near the entire rail, you might not be able to push it far enough forward to get the eye relief that you're going to need for this optic. So be cognizant and do your research before you buy a mount. So another con I want to say about this optic is, given that this ocular lens is so giant, if you're running a traditional 90-degree action, especially with a lower height scope mount, I could see you running into issues where you're busting your knuckles off the side of the scope. That's why I opted to get the 75-degree bolt for my impact precision actions. I'll roll up a picture here on the side of the 90 versus the 75, but Tate hooked me up with the 75-degree bolt, and I gave it a try. I ran it with my Nightforce ATACer and gave it a try in some matches, and honestly kind of liked the 75-degree bolt. We'll end up putting out a video on the 90 versus 75-degree bolt, but initially big fan of the 75-degree bolt. But just know, if you're running a traditional 90-degree action, especially if you're running that lower height scope mount, you might run into issues with banging your knuckles off it periodically, depending on your action and how you kind of run the bolt and stuff. The third thing that I'm going to ding this scope for is the fact that it's not quite the most parallax forgiving. Now, this is kind of twofold, and it's going to lead us over into the pros here. So one of the things that I read speculation on online, guys were saying that they thought it might not be parallax forgiving. I found in my experience that it was somewhat parallax forgiving. Is it as forgiving as a Nightforce ATACer, Tangent Theta, or a Zico? No, it's not as forgiving in terms of the parallax. But what I found is if you parallax it for like a 500 or 600 yard target, it's going to be good enough to get you hits on 1,000. You're not going to miss 1,000 because of parallax, unless you're shooting a super tiny target. And also, whenever you get inside those 3-ish 100-yard targets, it's pretty good there as well. Could you fine tune it? Yes. If you're going to shoot a stage that's 300 to 600 yards, I found that the numbers, at least for me, line up spot on. I tested it after the match, and the numbers on the turret here, the parallax numbers, do line up. So if I was to shoot a stage that was like, say, 200 to 400 yards or 200 to 500 yards, I would probably just set this parallax for like 300 to 400 yards and rest assured that I'm probably going to be inside the realm of it working. Same thing, if I'm shooting a stage that's 700 to 1100, I'll just set this thing at like the 800 or 900 yard mark. I find that anything from 700 to infinity gets you plenty good at 1,000 yards. So it is a somewhat forgiving parallax, but it's definitely not the most forgiving parallax. I feel like from a match standpoint, not a big deal. Generally, our close targets are kind of bigger, or they're close, so they're relatively easy, less affected by the wind, less chance you're going to miss those close targets. And then our really far away targets in PRS matches are generally bigger targets. But obviously, if it's a small target, you want to take that into consideration. Also, if you're that worried about parallax, since the scope does like to be mounted so far forward, back your head up a little bit, get scope shadow, center the scope shadow up, you're parallax forgiven at that point. So with that out of the way, let's kind of branch off into the pros of this optic. Pro number one is going to be the huge field of view. The field of view of this thing, I keep saying it and I feel like I'm overstating it, but I genuinely believe I'm not. The field of view is insane. We shot a dual mover stage. There were two movers at about 600, 650 yards, give or take. And it was just absolutely insane how much field of view this thing had. I backed it down to 18 power knowing it was a mover. And whenever I built my position, the mover had just started coming from the left to the right. Built my position a little out ahead the mover, and I was able to see like the majority of that path of that mover, which was pretty cool and pretty awesome. And then whenever I transitioned to the other mover, super easy to find it. Like that field of view is insane. And then, you know, on a normal stage, if you want to crank it up, I ran this optic on 25 power almost all day. And what that allowed me to do is discern smaller details. Part of that is the field of view. Part of that is, running the higher magnification as a result of the field of view. And then the third portion of that is the fact that the optical performance is really good in this scope. Like I said earlier in the video, I don't feel like it's quite as good as a Tangent Theta or a Zico, but I feel like it's slightly better or on par with like a Gen 3 Razor or a Night Force ATACR, which I feel any of those scopes that I just mentioned, like you could easily win PRS matches with. In my opinion, those are all alpha tier glass. Like you could argue, some, but those are all scopes that are plenty good. The parallax forgiveness in the scope is better than stuff like a Leopold Mark V. The glass is way better. I do like Leopold Mark V turrets, but these turrets are pretty sick. I like the 10 mil per rev. I like the way they designed the turrets. I like the fact that it's got the left side windage. Like there's a lot of things to like about this scope. Really the only negatives, as we said, are the price, the fact that it doesn't come with a lot of stuff, and the fact that it could be kind of mount specific. So just kind of take those things into consideration. All right, guys, so I think we've pretty much covered everything we need to cover on the optic. Again, this is new to me. I just got it in. I just ran it in its first match. I'm sure time will tell. My opinion will kind of change as time goes on. And I really look forward to comparing this to some other stuff on the market a little bit more. But eventually my plan is to do a full review on this optic, maybe 6 months, a year down the road, whatever it ends up being. But as for now, I wanted to get this first impressions video up and let me know what you guys thought of the video. Guys, I make these videos for your entertainment, educational purposes. I'm a big fan of sitting here watching YouTube at night. I like it way better than cable TV, so I try to give back to the community. Also, I want to grow the sport of PRS. PRS, a lot of people help me along, and I feel like making these videos, even if it helps one person, it's worth my time and energy and effort. But guys, I get my payment from these videos by your likes, your subscribes, your support, so all that stuff is greatly appreciated. As always, remember to train hard, shoot fast, and most importantly, be safe. God bless.